So now we get into the more of the substantive questions that we have for you, and we're going to move into our first topic, which is living with hearing loss. So I'll invite our panel 1 panelists up to the stage. So in topic 1, with our panel discussion as well as the subsequent polling and audience discussion that all of you will have the chance to participate in, we're going to explore the symptoms, health effects, and burdens on daily life that are a result of living with chemotherapy-induced hearing loss. Not only are we interested in knowing what those impacts are, but also how those impacts affect your activities in daily life and your quality of life. We want to know how those impacts might vary, either have varied over time, or even how those impacts might vary day to day, week to week, month to month. Also, not only are we interested in knowing, those direct impacts, some of those more daily impacts, but also we want to know, how your current experiences affect your concerns and worries about the future living with hearing loss. So, we have a wonderful panel here to kick off our conversation. We have Carolyn, Jeanette, Courtney, Josh, and Mindy. I think we have Josh, Courtney, then Mindy. But our panel here today, they will be sharing their personal experiences as patients and caregivers with chemo-induced hearing loss. So, Carolyn, take it away.
Oh, yay. Okay. Make sure everyone can hear me. Hi, my name is Carolyn Coveney. I was diagnosed with stage 4 neuroblastoma when I was 4.5 years old. I don't remember a lot of my treatment, but I live with the side effects of it every day. Since age 7, one of them has been profound high-frequency hearing loss, which is a result of having cisplatin and carboplatin chemotherapies. By the time I started losing my hearing, I was 5 years old. My mom says I had a big vocabulary by then, and my speech was well developed, so that was a good thing. On the other hand, sometimes it's a bad thing for the same reason. Because my speech was so well developed, hearing loss hasn't really changed the way I speak or pronounce words, so a lot of times people don't realize that I have a profound hearing impairment. In school, I always needed to sit in the front of the class. You've all been in school. How many third graders come in and say, I want to sit right in the front? Cool kids don't sit in the front. Nerds sit in the front. I was in third grade. I had a little bit of a chance of being cool. Obviously, that didn't work out, but when we had assemblies, I had to sit with my class, and if my class sat in the back, I sat in the back. And I had no idea what was going on, because although I knew people were talking, I had no idea what they were saying. When we went back to class to talk about the assemblies, I would get in trouble for not paying attention. It wasn't that I wasn't paying attention, it was that I couldn't hear what they were saying. Unless it was boring, in which case I didn't pay attention. As I got older, I didn't attend parties or large events because I couldn't hear what was going on. All of the sounds blend together and become white noise. For example, my friend's Sweet 16 was at a cafe. The music was really loud on the first floor, so I went upstairs. Even one floor away, it was still too loud for me. I tried to have conversations with people, but I had to spend so much energy focusing on their face and trying to figure out what they were saying that after 3 conversations, I went and sat in the corner, exhausted from having to focus so hard. I also don't go to parties or events because I don't want my friends to have to take care of me in crowded situations, because obviously that can't be much fun. Logically, I understand that my friends want to help me and include me, but the fact that I need so much help just to have a normal conversation makes me feel like more of a problem than a person. It's not just large group events. I also don't like activities with smaller groups of 5 to 6 people because it's hard to follow what everyone is saying. I feel like I'm a burden to others if I have to ask them to repeat things for me. I can't contribute to the group conversation because I'm not sure I'm hearing things correctly, so what I do say might not be relevant to the conversation, and I don't want to embarrass myself. This is especially true if it's a group of people I don't know very well. In those situations, I just sit there quietly. Other activities are limited by my hearing loss as well. Watching TV, one of the easiest things to do, is hard because sometimes I don't always hear what's happening. I like to stream things so I can pause and go back to figure out what's going on. This is another situation in which I feel like more of a problem because I either have to rewind and watch something again or ask someone to explain what's happening. I also just miss out on things. One of my favorite shows is Doctor Who on the BBC. After watching about 5 seasons of it, I convinced my mom to watch it with me. When the doctor pulled out the sonic screwdriver, my mom said something about the noise it made, and I had no idea what she was talking about. I had watched probably 50 episodes of it, and I never knew that the sonic screwdriver made a noise. Things get worse when I can't pause or go back. I had seen trailers for a movie called The Zookeeper's Wife, and I'd really look forward to seeing it. However, since it was set in Poland during World War II, after about 10 minutes I realized I had no idea what anyone was saying because of their accents. I spent the rest of the movie counting the lights in the ceiling and deciding if the curtains on the wall were crimson or more of a deep burgundy. I'll get back to you on that. My hearing loss makes me nervous 24/7. It's worse when I'm in situations in which I can't hear what's going on around me. For example, when I was a counselor at the Smithsonian summer camps, my mom and I made the commute on a Sunday so I could map it out and know the number of stops before my destination because the quality of public transportation announcements are really bad. Even when I'm at home, I'm always nervous. I have a somewhat irrational fear of crickets. Every time I walk into a room in my house, I stop and scan the room for crickets. We don't even have a cricket problem. It just makes me anxious because I can't hear them. It's hard to pick one thing that worries me the most about my hearing loss. One day, it might be missing out on something other people my age are doing. Another day, it might be taking the metro someplace I've never been before because I can't understand the announcements and I'm afraid of missing my stop. Another day, it might be going into a large classroom or event where I feel unsure of what's going on because I can't really hear someone speaking if they're not directly in front of me. Overall, I guess my biggest worry about my hearing is that it just makes my world so much smaller. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jeanette Lamberti, and I am the mom of Jason, who is 15 years old and is a survivor of stage 4 neuroblastoma. I'm grateful to share our story here today. When asked about what the most significant impact hearing loss has had on Jason, I immediately thought of his education. But as I thought about it, I came to the conclusion that it's this social experience that has had the greatest impact on his life, almost as much as cancer has. Jason was 2.5 when I knew he couldn't hear me. It was 10 months into cancer treatment and he was watching TV. I thought at first he was distracted, but he was looking right at me and his face was all scrunched up, but his eyes were wide. He was trying to understand me, but he couldn't. He did this over and over again when he was very young, well before he learned how to read lips. I will never forget that look. Back then, the magnitude and life-changing side effect of chemotherapy was beyond what I could have imagined. He was still very sick, and we had a long road ahead of us to even survive. His first hearing test was a nightmare. His diagnosis was severe to profound high-frequency hearing loss, which would require hearing aids. He got his first hearing aids a little over a year after being diagnosed with cancer. He went from having normal hearing at 18 months old to having severe to profound loss at 2.5. How could this be? Wearing hearing aids has been awful for Jason from the very beginning. His ears hurt, he had headaches all the time, and he couldn't express to me how uncomfortable he really was. He was edgy and jumpy. He heard every noise, air conditioner, or dog barking down the street when he wore his hearing aids. It was so difficult for him to tune things out. Even with the best hearing aid technology, he still had to work so hard to hear. Teachers and therapists would often comment that Jason was distracted and not focused. He wasn't distracting or lacking focus at all. In fact, he was super focused and constantly trying to figure out what was going on around him. He would often lose or break the hearing aids, and he was very happy when we couldn't find them and enjoyed, and still does, taking them out to block out life noises. School was tough. His teachers were given a microphone and transmitter, which allowed them to talk directly into the hearing aids. It helped him to focus on the teacher rather than everything else going on around him. But many teachers would forget to turn off their microphone, and Jason would hear conversations with other students, teachers, or even the teacher in the bathroom. Jason struggled in school, but he never gave up, and neither did I. He had many services, hearing education teachers, speech, and an amazing oral transliterator who still takes notes for him and prompts him in class. He's smart and witty, and he's acquired a great vocabulary. But it is hard as a parent to see him struggle every single day. As a young kid, Jason was very outgoing, social, fearless, and funny. But as he got older, his nature changed. He became shy, afraid to make mistakes in school, as well as with peers. He didn't participate in class. It was frustrating for him and for me as a parent to see how miscommunication with hearing loss can become ugly. Many times I wanted to scream that he was hearing impaired and that's why he wasn't listening or following an instruction. It's hard even now to write about this time in his life. Not only was school frustrating, but sports, which should be a happy place for many boys, was also a struggle. Baseball has always been a passion for Jason. He was a toddler when he was diagnosed, and I believe that we spent the next 2.5 years of treatment throwing a ball or whatever we could find back and forth to pass the time when he couldn't eat or to distract him from pain. He learned to slide head first up and down the halls of Sloan Kettering, and he knew how to slide so that a Mediport in his chest, used for chemo, was the shoulder he kept off the ground. Everyone would watch him and hold their breath, especially me. He began his love of all things Mets during that time and even met his favorite player, Mike Piazza. He couldn't get enough baseball. He was unafraid. He would slide and run even though cancer treatment had made him weak and off balance. I had tears watching him. I thought T-ball, Little League, high school baseball, college, and who knows, maybe the major leagues were in his future. He was beating the dismal odds of neuroblastoma. He could conquer the world. Besides, the Mets would need a great catcher or third baseman when his idols retired. His talent increased and increased as he got stronger, and it took a long time, but with much therapy and a never-give-up attitude. He was a strong little boy after cancer. As a little leaguer, his love and willingness for playing the game changed significantly, though. He was frustrated with hearing aids. He couldn't hear much with a batting helmet on or from the outfield if that's where he was playing. He struggled with coaches and teammates to process what they were saying. A few times, teams he was on had kids that he knew, and that made it easier because he could rely on them to help if he needed it. The coaches talked a lot, and sometimes were talking all at once. If a coach knew about his hearing loss, it made no difference in how they coached. They just didn't get it. Over time, he lost interest, not for the game, but playing on a team or any team for that matter. It was too frustrating for him. I spent many days catching and throwing with him, thinking, sadly, how could he be so amazing and we can't find a place where he could do this on a team? Believe me, I tried and he tried again and again. He gave up in the 5th grade. He took a long break from baseball, and finally in 8th grade he found himself an intramural team, and he was the catcher, and my heart soared. High school started last year. He didn't make the team, but he said the coach is asking him if he's going to try again this year. He said he will try again. The focus of our lives was always to cure the cancer, whatever it took, live with side effects, and be grateful. And we are grateful for all of it. But if I had known the magnitude of how Jason's life would be affected by his hearing loss, I certainly would have opted for a treatment that included a preventative component. Watching my child continue to struggle after beating cancer all these years has taken its toll. I hope Jason's story will help to see the real issues that our cancer kids with hearing loss face every day. It could be so much better. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joshua Hoffmeister, and I'm 21 years old, and I'm a survivor of neuroblastoma cancer. I've been living with chemo-induced hearing loss for almost 20 years, and I've been asked to come before you today to bring my experience and insight of living with such. So a tiny bit of background about me. I have no recollection of my time having cancer or my time before. So my hearing from the first point I can remember up until now is what I consider quote unquote normal. What others consider my normal sense of hearing is called profound hearing loss. And honestly, that was a difficult concept for me to grasp at first, knowing that everybody had more than me, but not being able to compare that to anything. As I grew up, I began to notice where my hearing was lacking in social circumstances and how I could sort of overcome or compensate for my loss of hearing. So what I'd like to discuss with you are two major techniques that I use today and have been using since probably the age of 4 years old. One major one is lip reading. Growing up, you watch a lot of cartoons, and you sort of start to unravel how the mystery of linking, speaking, and somebody's lips moving. So you sort of start to understand the movement of vowels and, like shown before, the higher frequency letters like K, T, S, P. Now everybody's different, everybody talks differently, but the science still will transfer from person to person. So that allows me to effectively sort of piece together what you're trying to say to me, even though I can't physically hear it. Another technique that I use is body language. Now, for an example, if you're trying to console somebody in a serious situation, it's kind of weird being a person with hearing loss. You can't just ask in the middle of somebody crying, could you repeat that? That's not socially acceptable. So you kind of say comforting things that will help them, but in the back of your mind, you're really just wondering, all right, what's going on with this person? Because, if you ask later, your girlfriend's going to be like, oh, well, why weren't you listening to me? So going from the techniques that I learned, let's move on to the challenges that I have to deal with day in and day out. Most challenges you notice right off the back. Oh, well, he can't hear. That's pretty obvious. But there's a couple of things that being a person with hearing loss, you can't simply control. So I call that the variable factor. That being, if I'm speaking to somebody based on my environment, if I'm in a loud area like a cafeteria or a concert, or versus being in my car, I sort of have to adapt to the environment and try to figure out what will work best for me, even if I've never been there before. Now, I had said cars specifically because there's a couple of different things with driving a car and dealing with hearing loss that sort of creates an anxiety and paranoia for you. When you're driving a car, it has happened to me before where you have an ambulance going by and you're the only person in front of the ambulance until it's 5 feet behind you. Everybody else looking around on the highway you aren't going to have a bumper sticker that says, I'm deaf. So everybody's going to kind of look at you like, all right, what's this guy doing? He's just holding everything up. That's one thing that you have to deal with. Another difficult challenge is when I begin a conversation with somebody who I have never met, being a first impression, I will either be, like when I talked into the mic, too loud or too quiet, and I'll mumble. Which, when you're making a first impression, can be very difficult. You sort of come off as obnoxious or shy, which I seem to be neither of. Another difficulty that I have to deal with is when you're not really paying attention, not everybody understands that when you have hearing loss, you have to focus a lot in order just to even get the most simplistic sentences to make sense. So if you're just hanging around with your buddies and not anything serious is going on, somebody just says, oh, you want to grab a beer? Next thing you know that comes out of my mouth is a weird response because I heard, oh, you want to go here? sometimes you have to use common sense, but that's not always the first thing that comes to a young kid's mind. So you kind of just say whatever weird response comes, and usually when you're not with friends, it will be awkward and very strange. When you're with friends, they'll kind of just laugh it off and repeat the question, and you just figure out what you're going to do. This was mostly my speech, but what I had not written and what I do want to talk to everybody about is I have my mother here who's going to be speaking. Now, my mother and my father are two completely different people, which is why they got divorced. But growing up and dealing with two completely different parents, they both reacted to my hearing loss in completely different ways. My mother was very helpful. She's here today. She's going to give her own speech. My dad, quite the opposite. He is more in denial of everything that happened, wanted to treat me like a normal human being, which I'm fully understanding of. I'm 21 years old. I've taken the time to realize what both of them try to do, and they're both great people, and they try to do the best they can. But having to deal with a father who was in denial of my hearing loss was very difficult growing up. And just like everybody else, sometimes you just got to make up your own mind and not listen to your parents. But that was also something that I felt that I should take the time to share with you today, is that, everybody grows up and they have to deal with those types of problems. But when you have hearing loss, you also have additional problems that you have to deal with in just a normal stance of growing up. So, with that being said, thank you everybody for giving me the chance to speak today, and I hope that my insight brings you clarity to the struggles that I endure every day, and hopefully together we can prevent this from happening to future generations. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. My name is Courtney Mendeville. I'm 34 years old, and I currently work as a senior product manager for a healthcare company in Silicon Valley. When I was just 6 weeks old, I was diagnosed with neuroblastoma, which is cancer found in the nerve tissue. The treatment I received included multiple surgeries, numerous rounds of chemotherapy, full body radiation, extended hospital stays, a relapse diagnosis, countless blood transfusions, and many other therapies. After 4 years of intense treatment, I was declared cancer-free. While the cancer was hopefully in my past, the journey of being a childhood cancer survivor was just beginning. During my treatment, there was never any talk of long-term effects from the treatment I was receiving. In the 1980s, when I was treated, there was very little information known about side effects from treatments. And even if they did know the side effects from treatments, there was very few treatment options available. Since I was declared cancer-free almost 30 years ago, I have endured many long-term effects from treatments. I have undergone a half hysterectomy to remove a secondary benign tumor, encountered 3 emergency surgeries for intestine obstructions. I have spent my elementary years catheterizing my bladder 6 times a day, experienced growth and muscle development challenges, and I faced many fertility issues, just to name a few. I am still closely monitored for secondary cancers and heart issues that I am at high risk for from the treatment that I received. One of the most impactful long-term effects that affects me each and every day is my profound hearing loss as a result of the chemotherapy I received as a child. My first memory of noticing I was different was in 2nd grade when the hearing test mobile came to my elementary school. We had all lined up excited to get a cookie and a sticker after the test was completed. After my test, I was taken aside and asked multiple questions, such as, had I ever seen an ear doctor? Had anyone ever told me that I had a hearing loss? And a few others. They handed me a slip of paper that I would take home to my parents, recommending I see an audiologist and be further tested. Shortly after, I was diagnosed with hearing loss in both ears. This diagnosis would not be connected to chemotherapy treatment until years later when I was in high school. At the time, the audiologist gave us no options to reverse the problem or a solution to increase my hearing abilities. In the years following the diagnosis, I was placed in speech therapy during middle school, where I was taken out of my class an hour each day to practice my sounds. It wasn't until the 8th grade when a physician finally told me that the speech therapy wouldn't help me since I couldn't even pronounce the sounds that I couldn't hear. My hearing loss was causing me to have a speech impediment. It was extremely frustrating to know my speech impediment was connected to my hearing loss with no treatment options available at the time. My friends and peers would always comment on it, sometimes make fun of it, but it always made me feel different. Sometimes people would think I had a learning disability or would associate my speech impediment with other challenges. Dealing with any kind of medical challenge in adolescence is extremely difficult, and feeling different from your peers can be very isolating and that you always carry with you. After graduating from college and entering the professional world, I began to really understand the difficulties to having a profound hearing loss. During my first job, I soon realized that I was constantly asking my boss to repeat himself, missing important details from conversations, and at times even avoiding conversations altogether. My hearing loss was affecting my performance and finally had to let my boss know about my situation and that our interactions needed to be modified. He was extremely accommodating and would often email me first before discussions. We set up video conferencing for the office, this was before Skype, so that I could see our clients during conversations to read their lips since it was extremely difficult for me to understand conversations over the phone. He really helped to build my confidence, which would be instrumental in communicating with future bosses and colleagues. Because of my hearing loss, I cannot understand what someone is saying if they have their back towards me, if there's a lot of noise around, or if they have a strong accent. I also cannot hear any high-pitched sounds such as watch alarms or carbon monoxide alarms. I have never enjoyed watching movies since I can't hear the dialogue without subtitles. And I have never been able to recall song lyrics since the words all seem to run together. Growing up, I didn't realize how much I relied on reading lips to get by and how much that affected my hobbies, entertainment, and the world around me. Aside from my family being very aware of my hearing loss, most everyone around me has accepted and adjusted to communicating with me. My friends, my boyfriend, and colleagues are always mindful to look at me when they are speaking, not to talk to me from another room, and find less noisy restaurants and places to meet at, and so on. As I think about the future, I often worry if my hearing loss will continue to get worse and what new challenges I may face. My hope is that children who are faced with cancer treatments in the future will have better options to avoid these long-term effects. I am so grateful to stand before all of you today, cancer-free, and advocating for better treatment to enhance the quality of life for children with cancer. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mindy Dykes, and I'm from a little town in western Wisconsin. My son Connor was rushed to an emergency room when he was only 6 weeks old. A CT scan discovered a mass that took up his entire left hemisphere the size of my husband's fist, and he was prepped for emergency brain surgery. Days later, Connor was diagnosed with congenital glioblastoma multiforme stage 4. Our care team had an aggressive plan to treat him with 6 rounds of inpatient chemotherapy, outpatient chemotherapy, and a stem cell harvest and a bone marrow transplant. We were warned of all the possible side effects of treatment, one of those possibilities being hearing loss. We said yes to life-threatening treatments for a chance to save our son's life. Connor is now 11 years old and trying to navigate 6th grade. He suffers from many late effects from his treatments. Some of them are partial blindness, refractory epilepsy, and extreme hearing loss. Connor was tested in many areas to mark baselines before his aggressive treatment. At that time, he had no signs or indications of hearing loss. 1.5 years post-recovery from his bone marrow transplant, his hearing was tested again. I will never forget the day that I watched through the window as our son began to miss the hearing clues that he was being given. My heart shattered. He couldn't hear. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of the challenges he and those around him would face in the world of hearing loss. I'd like to share with you some examples of his struggles. Connor can hear lower frequencies. This means that he can hear my husband's voice better than mine. There was a night that I had burnt something in the oven. Connor had already been put to bed. The fire alarm went off. Connor did not startle. Connor did not wake. The alarm was armed with a female voice. He could not hear it. Approximately 76% of public school teachers are female, thus resulting in higher-pitched voices, creating a challenging learning environment for Connor. He has expressed his frustration at school. He gets embarrassed because he can't pronounce words like his peers. He tears up when asked to read aloud in class. He has shared with me on numerous occasions that when he is corrected on a pronunciation of a word, he feels like an idiot. When around anyone else in the room, he will whisper in my ear what he wants to be communicated or asked. He's too afraid to speak for himself. We've had some laughs along the way, too, like the time I told him to put his plate in the dishwasher. He stared at me in confusion and asked why I wanted him to put his face in the dishwasher. He has gotten wiser with age. He knows he's different. He asked me last year why his sister and I didn't need hearing aids like he. It was then that I explained to him about the medicine that saved his life but took his hearing. He responds slowly when asked questions. Not everyone is kind and patient. Connor has already been the target of bullying. Connor's hearing loss affects him every moment of every day, as well as our entire family. Crowds drain his energy. The noise overwhelms him. We are constantly weighing out to take the adventure over his endurance, his quality of life over our quality family time. His big sister plays volleyball and has lived her whole life in the shadow of Connor. Spending an hour in a gymnasium is exhausting for him and results in tears, irritability, raising his voice. I hate having to choose between a Connor meltdown day or watching my daughter play volleyball. He's never been on a team or even wants to try. He complains of being lonely. For being a popular kid at school, not many ask him over for playtime. I worry more each day about how to best advocate for him, for his own independence, and how to still keep him safe. Most importantly, how to keep his spirit renewed and to grow his feeling of belonging. Connor is an intelligent, caring, and kind young man whose spark is fading. That is devastating not only for me as his mom, but for those who will never get to see him become all that he is truly capable of. You have the ability to change that. Your time today means the world to me. Thank you.
Each of these panelists had to be very brave to get up here and share their voices first. So let's give the whole panel another round of applause. I'll say that again because we can't give them enough rounds of applause, but sorry for the mic not being on. Just wanted to comment on how brave it was of these individuals to share their stories first. So let's give them yet another round of applause. Okay, so now we are moving into the next portion of topic 1, focusing on understanding the impacts and burdens of chemotherapy-induced hearing loss on daily life. And so we're going to now broaden the discussion to the audience through another set of polling questions. So we can go to our first topic 1, panel 1 polling question. All right, so for all of our patients and caregivers, please respond with what is the most severe level of hearing loss you suffer at any frequency range? And your options here are normal, A, normal, B, mild, C, moderate, D, moderately severe, E, severe, or F, profound. And again, this is what is the most severe level of hearing loss you suffer at any frequency range? Give you a few more moments to get your response in. At the moment, it looks like the greatest experience that those of you participating today have is with the severity level of hearing loss being profound at any frequency range. After that, it looks like about a quarter of you have moderately severe hearing loss, about a fifth, a little over a fifth, moderate. We have just under 15% with severe, and we also have some representation from those with normal hearing and mild hearing loss. We can go to our second question. So this is our first question where you have the option of selecting multiple responses. So please select the top 3 of the following hearing loss related issues by their impact on you or your family members' daily quality of life. And so your options are A, speech development, B, ability to communicate, C, learning and school challenges, D, emotional and behavioral problems, E, participation in sports or other extracurricular activities, F, ability to socialize or social anxiety, G, depression, or I, other. So please select the top 3 of the following hearing loss related issues by their impact on you or your family members' daily quality of life. Looks like there may be an issue with them coming in given the number of results.
Move the top 3 choices to the top using the arrows.
Oh. So on this, the way that it works, if you're following along on the URL or the web browser, is you actually are organizing these. So you'll be able to move them up and down using the arrows to put them in order. So it is no longer limited to the top 3. My apologies for that mistake. You will actually be ranking each of these using the arrows. Yes. Oh, question. That is a good question. So I have not experienced this type of question with the texting before. You cannot do this with the texting question. So unfortunately, if you are following along via text, this is one question you will not be able to answer. Okay, just give you a few more moments. I know asking you to prioritize a lot of things here on this single question in terms of ranking these, in terms of the impact on you or your family members' daily quality of life. Okay, so it looks like as any final responses are trickling in, as it stands, collectively, you've ranked the ability to socialize and social anxiety as the number 1 impact. After that, it looks like you've ranked learning and school challenges as the thing that is impacted the second most, followed by ability to communicate, emotional or behavioral problems, participation in sports or other activities following that, number 6 being speech development, 7th, depression, and 8th, some other issue as a result of hearing loss that has had an impact on your daily quality of life. And so as we move into the audience discussion following this, would very much like to know some of the reasoning behind why you ranked each of these different things in the position that you did, in terms of what has the most burden on your daily quality of life. If we can go to our next question. Okay, so now we're going to ask you to select the single most important thing that you or your affected family member used to do, or maybe were never able to do, that you now can't do as well or at all because of your hearing loss. So again, please select the thing that single most important thing that you or your affected family member used to be able to do, or perhaps were never able to do, that they or you now can't do at all, or do as well because of your hearing loss. Your response options are A, participate in sports or extracurricular activities, B, do well in school, C, communicate with friends or participate in social activities, D, find a job, E, perform well at a job or work, F, take care of a family member, or G, some other thing that you or your family member either used to be able to do or were never able to do that you can't do as well now because of hearing loss. Okay. So I'll give you a few more moments to get in your response to this question. It looks like as it stands, C, communicating with friends and participating in school is the single most important thing that you used to be able to do, or maybe were never able to do, that you can't do now because of your hearing loss. After that, it looks like just over a fifth of you rated doing well in school as the single most important thing. Several of you, many of you, selected other. So definitely during the audience discussion, if you're one of those people, please raise your hand and let us know what you selected. And then the fourth most important single thing being participating in sports or extracurricular activities. No one selected finding a job, performing well at a job or work, or taking care of a family member as being the single most important thing that has been affected by hearing loss. We can go to our next question. So our fourth question is, how has the impact of you or your loved one's hearing loss changed over time? So you want to know, A, has the impact gotten greater or affected additional areas of your life over time? This could be at home, school, work, or with friendships. Has the impact of your hearing loss remained the same over time? Has the impact lessened over time? Or are you not sure if the impact has changed over time? Again, give you a few more moments to get your responses into this question. Right now, the impact, the experience that's most represented, with over 2/3 of you reporting that the impacts of your hearing loss have gotten greater over time, or they've affected additional areas of your life more over time. About a fifth of you have reported that the impact has remained the same over time, and there's some of you that are not sure if it has changed over time, but no one has reported that the impact of the hearing loss has lessened over time. Can we go to the last of our Topic 1 polling questions? All right, so our final Topic 1 polling question on the impact of the disease is, please select, please rank the following hearing loss related issues by how much they worry you or your loved one. So this will be another one of those ranking questions where we ask you to use the arrows to move up and down each of these things. So the options are academic success, finding a job or career success, ability to live independently, lack of social interaction, physical safety from not being able to hear adequately, long-term mental and emotional health, that things will get worse, or other. Please rank those in terms of how much they worry you or your loved one. We'll give you a few more moments. I know there's a lot of things, again, here to rank. So continue to submit your responses if you haven't yet. At this point, the number one thing, oh, well, they're switching, so maybe I did jump the gun there for a second. It must be very neck and neck there between number 1 and 2. So we're ranking here how much these various things worry you or your loved one, and these are worries related to your hearing loss. And so currently, number 1 is long-term mental and emotional health. The second most greatest worry is that the hearing loss will get worse. And man, there we go. I knew it was neck and neck, tied in first. So then we have third, lack of social interaction being your greatest worry. Fourth being academic success. Fifth being physical safety from not being able to hear adequately. Sixth being the ability to live independently. Seventh being the worry of finding a job or having career success. And eighth being some other worry related to your hearing loss. So thank you all very much for participating in those polling questions. We are now going to move into the third part of our topic 1 discussion, building on, keep going, there we go. Building on the great panel testimonies that we heard, as well as the polling questions that you've just answered. We got to see that there was quite a range of different individuals being represented here in the room in terms of when you first were treated with chemotherapy, how long you've been living with hearing loss, but also in these topic 1 questions, we got to see that there was actually a fair range of experiences with different amount of hearing loss, and in daily life that the impacts are very large, crossing a whole range of different activities in daily life and aspects of quality of life. So the first thing I want to do is pose a question to the room, and again, if you have a response, just raise your hand. We've got 2 lovely mic runners who will bring you a mic, state your name, and give your response. But our first question is very broad. We want to make sure that, although we had this wonderful panel that represented a lot of views, that if there are any experiences with hearing loss, impacts, for example, in school or at work, that you have, any stories that you might be able to tell us that exemplify how your hearing loss has most impacted you, that's what we want to start out with and hear from you first. So is there anybody that would like to start the conversation sharing an experience that you've had in your daily life? It doesn't need to be limited to just at work or at school, but really in any aspect that to you exemplifies the most important burden of living with hearing loss on you personally. So we've got a hand right here. We'll start.
My name is Melinda Freeman, and my son, Justin Freeman, was diagnosed the first week of January 2016 with medulloblastoma. He was age 12 and a half at the time. His birthday, he'll turn 15 next week. He went through 10 months of chemotherapy and radiation, cranial radiation. His hearing loss at this time is actually mild to moderate, which you would think, wow, that's awesome. I'm here because this is the single reason that he says, I wish the cancer had killed me. He has been so isolated because of the hearing loss. He's moved into middle school, but we had to completely move residents into a new school system because of the cancer and because of the need to be closer to treatment. And for the long-term effects that are ongoing, we're only 2.5 years out. This is just, or 2.5 years since diagnosis, this is just beginning for us. Mm-hmm. He has really struggled at school with making friends because they don't know where he's come from. He doesn't want to tell them that he's a cancer survivor. He wants to be normal. He wants to be a normal 14, almost 15-year-old. And he can't be. He can't hear what they're saying. He sees them walking down the halls, laughing and talking to each other, and he can't join in. This has been, if anyone had told me it would be the hearing loss, because oncology, we'll have a wonderful oncology team. I have a wonderful school system education team that are doing everything. Academically, he's soaring. We're still doing fine. But he thinks that the life that we gave him by saving his life isn't worth it right now. And I know we're still close out, and I know that could change. But I've got to get him through this part, and I'm worried about that. It doesn't seem like a life or death issue, but it really is to these kids, especially where they are. And I really want that to come across today, that just because we managed to beat the tumor this time does not mean that what we've given him was anything like what he would have liked to have had from this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you. And if you don't mind, I have a follow-up question for you. So you're, how, I guess, yeah, do you mind describing for us a little bit of, how, you said the social isolation has really been the impact that has had the greatest negative effect on your son.
Yes.
But then you also started to alluding to this life or death issue. Do you mind telling us at all, how long has your son been, feeling depressed or having psychological, emotional impacts related to the social isolation or social anxiety?
It was difficult in treatment because we had to move, so we didn't have a community to pull from. But we developed that. But even with that, I would say probably by the end of treatment, we were having to put him on antidepressants. And I hope that would get better over time. We have him in counseling. He's very verbal. He'll tell you how he's feeling, but it's not getting any better. And we're only 2 years out right now. I don't know how long it's going to take to get better. And I cannot watch him every moment of the day. He's going to be 15. This is a severe issue that's affecting him in a way that I would have never imagined. And like I said, I want to reemphasize, he only has mild to moderate high frequency. Half the time he can somewhat function without anyone ever knowing he has any hearing loss without the hearing aids, because he'll take them off as soon as he leaves home. He's still, in the eyes of the community, in the eyes of the medical community, he's still very functional and operational. So I don't feel like we can get the help and the support we need.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay. Who else would like to share an example or a story in their daily life that exemplifies how hearing loss impacts you or your loved one? Yes, right here.
Hi, so my name is Ann Puipain. This is my son, Jaden. And so I just kind of wanted to piggyback on her story, which made me want to speak up because it is very severe. And I'm kind of, we're all in the same boat because Jaden himself was diagnosed at 12 with medulloblastoma, and he just turned 15 in January, so he's going on 16. So I understand exactly where you're coming from. A lot of it, beyond the symptoms that cancer and treatment and everything just causes, the hearing loss is an issue. It's a major issue. He's talked about the same feelings of depression, not having friends, or his friends that were his friends are no longer his friends and surpassing him. He was going to school, starting high school, partial days, and even that became a big challenge because teachers couldn't even understand and didn't sympathize in the fact of the ongoing effects because they hear, oh, he's over, chemo and radiation, boom, you should be back to normal. No, you should not be back to normal, and they don't understand that. So always getting called in about his attendance and what we can do as parents to help him, when teachers should be more understanding and compassionate of the situation that he can't hear when they're talking. Jaden has complained about when they have group events, the children are talking, and with his hearing aids, like what they were talking about up front in the panel, everything just sounds like a congested mess. And the students will acknowledge him and just say, hey, did you not hear what we said? Do you not, are you not partaking in group events? And he's saying there's just too many of you guys talking at once. It's a big blur. So at this moment, best for him, we had to start him with online homeschooling because I don't know about other treatments. Luckily with his hearing aids, he has Bluetooth. So a lot of it can just focus strictly, like just right in his ear, and he can drown everything else out. But on that note, I just want to say a lot of this hearing stuff, we're totally on the same boat. I understand exactly where you're coming from. It is a huge issue, and he does feel very just kind of lonely, in a sense, in that perspective.
And Anne, when you said that he's friends that were his friends are no longer his friends, he's become very lonely. Has this been, and there probably are many causes of this, but in your conversations, what about the hearing loss has driven this? Is it the difficulty in participating in those large group settings? Is it being withdrawn from school, partial day, now going to homeschooling? What aspect has really driven that social isolation?
It's just being in a sense of, I want to say just they're normal teenagers. They're growing ahead of him. They laugh, they play, they socialize, they're in group activities. This is something he cannot do. Stress that he cannot understand a lot of what's happening. He can't understand just socializing in classes to discuss subject matters and answers. And so the kids just see it more as of, okay, this was a Jaden we understood back then. This is not a Jaden we understand now. So within that perspective, it's one big whole issue, but the hearing loss in that perspective is huge with just the isolation factor, the teachers not being in support, because we talked to the teachers and have numerous meetings about his hearing issues and how maybe they need to cater to it a little bit more. They just feel it's more of a him needing to cater to them and listening more closely. They don't understand that perspective of where he's coming from. So that isolates him in general, because now the other students are kind of seeing what the teacher's expectations are of him, and they're just kind of thinking the same thing. So is he just really slow? Is he just not really listening? So in that perspective, that's how the socialization at school is just kind of taking him away from everything, and his depression begins because he's lonely. Everyone's isolating him. So it's best for him just to do the online schooling because of the hearing, because at least this way, the teachers can socialize with him, not just, face to face with the monitor, but at the same time, like I said, even with his hearing aids, we are lucky that he has the Bluetooth that they can speak directly in his ear so he can drown out a lot of the noises.
Thank you for explaining. That's very helpful.
You're very welcome.
Yes. We have a hand on my right side of the room.
Hi, my name is Pam Thistlewaite, and this is my daughter, Emma. Emma had been diagnosed with osteosarcoma back in 2015. She's 15 now, almost. Tomorrow's her birthday. Her struggles, I would say her hearing is moderately decreased. She's probably good about my hearing now. And her biggest struggles were during lunch at school. She couldn't hear her friends, so she would just sit, right, and not talk because she couldn't hear what was going on around her. One thing that I would have to say the school has done, which has been wonderful for her, is she actually does not attend regular school anymore. She has she goes to school after everyone else is gone. It's an after-school program called the STEP program at her school. Kids who have medical issues where they have to come in and out of school, or kids who've maybe gotten into trouble or the regular school is not good for them, attend. She's able to get tutored every day, so she's keeping up and actually advancing ahead of her classmates because of this. So it's been really good for us to have this opportunity for her. But she, just as you were saying over there, has suffered socially. I mean, she really doesn't hang out with any of her friends that she used to hang out with, which is sad. But she's made new friends. She spends a lot more time on social platforms, making friends that way. Bitter's one of them. So she has made other friends in other ways where she doesn't have to use her hearing to communicate, where she's typing to them and they're typing back. And but that's all I wanted to say was I think there are other options for kids too that can be helpful, and I think the STEP program that she's in has been really wonderful for her.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that, and happy early birthday. Yes, we have a hand here in the front.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Widener. I was diagnosed with neuroblastoma stage 4 in 2016, January, a couple weeks after my 12th birthday. It's been really hard dealing with the hearing loss. It's terrible, but it's not as bad as like somebody else, like profound. One of the things that I most deal with is I have school, but sometimes I can't be there because I'm at doctor's appointments or I'm doing some other thing that deals with my cancer. So I use a program called Google Hangouts, and some of my teachers, they don't get it. They don't want to sign on one day because they think that it's not relevant, I guess you could say, that I don't need to listen to what is going on in class that day. But then I am behind in class. I am behind in everything that my peers are way ahead of me. I have to ask for everybody else for help. It's really hard. As some other people were saying, I don't have the friends that I used to have anymore. I hang out with some of them, but I've had to make new friends that were older because I guess they understand more. They're more mature. And it's just really hard, but I'm trying to make accommodations by talking to people about it and just asking them to speak up whenever they have their voices low or to repeat something, which does get tiring, and I'm sure they get tiring too. And sometimes, even though I can't hear what they're saying in class or just whenever I'm having a conversation, I don't tell them to repeat it because they've already repeated it 7 times. And I know that they're probably annoyed and they just want me to have a normal conversation. But that's not possible for me sometimes.
And have you found that the your hearing loss has further complicated missing class for, you said for the cancer reasons? I know you said you use Google Hangouts, maybe catch up with your peers, things like that. And has the hearing loss made that harder to do?
Yeah, because of the connections over Google Hangouts, I use it on my computer. I also use it on my iPad and my phone. But sometimes they do not speak loud enough to where I can hear it, or because of it's on a computer, and sometimes technology does not work properly.
Yes.
I cannot hear what they're saying, and if my computer freezes, then again I do not know what they're saying. I do not know what's going on in class, and I completely miss out on a whole lesson. Especially math, which is my hardest subject. I used to advance in all subjects, and I'm still doing pretty good, but it's 10 times harder for me to get that A+ on every test. 10 times harder for me to be able to do anything, and I would like to have better accommodations to be able to not have to go through all of this.
Thank you very much for sharing that.
Thank you.
We have a hand over here on the.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Boucher. My daughter was diagnosed with hepatoblastoma in January of this year. She just finished chemotherapy in the end of June, and she's 2. She just turned 2 about a week ago. So the biggest impact on her life as of right now is she stop talking during chemotherapy. And I didn't know if it was because of the hearing loss or she just felt like crap all the time. Two, her speech has picked up a little since we got her hearing aids, but the hardest thing for our daily life is her age. She's only 2. She can't tell me why she wants to take her hearing aids out. She can't tell me how, we have a loud house. I have a 4-year-old and she has a twin sister, so it's always loud in our house. So I don't know if I don't know anything about how it's impacting her. I have to guess as a mom. I have to try to figure it out. I have to try to figure out what I do to help her. What therapies does she need? How do I understand how she's hearing? And then I hear all these stories from these older children of the impact, and I look at her future long term, that there's a lot of things that she's going to have to face that I'm going to have to help her through. So it's a huge challenge that you have to take on, and there's no choices given in the beginning other than she needs this. Like you saw in this slides that with hepatoblastoma, you can't not do cisplatin. You can't change the dose of it. She needs that protocol, and you have to give it to her. So there's been a big impact already, and I have a long future of an impact for her. It's hard to not get emotional too. I came here and I had no idea that I would feel so emotional, but it's so raw. We're, a couple months out of treatment, and she had normal hearing prior to that, and I had to advocate for her from the beginning to have hearing tests done, to be given STS for part of her cycles. Those were things that weren't given to me as options. I had to fight for those things, and I had to advocate for those things, and it's hard, and just her age makes it difficult too. She's just too little to understand what's going on, and even to communicate any of her needs to me or challenges. I have to guess them, and I have to figure it out, until she gets old enough to articulate those things and developmentally can help me understand and communicate with me how it's impacting her. So.
Well, thank you for that. I have 2 questions for you. One, you said you advocated for hearing tests. Can you tell us a little bit about, when you discovered, the hearing loss, and had there been continued hearing tests? Is that stabilized?
Yes. So at the beginning of round 2, she'd had a baseline hearing test done, and at the beginning of round 2, I asked the inpatient doctors at the start of that round, can we recheck her hearing? And they had said no, because we wouldn't be able to do anything about it. So what would be the purpose? We'll wait till the end of chemo. And I said, no, I'm not going to accept that, because even if we can't do anything about it, I'd like to know. And so I asked her primary oncologist, and he said that would be fine. So at the beginning of round 3, we did another hearing test, and that already showed that there had been a decline in her hearing. And unfortunately, at that time, we'd already given cisplatin, so it was too late to talk about sodium thiosulfate. And so I got in touch with Christine Knight at the OHSU, and she talked to me about it, and she helped me advocate, and she gave the doctors information to say, yes, let's let her do this for the rest of her rounds. And her hearing tests, because of her age also, her hearing tests are difficult to read because she's not old enough to participate in some of the testing. And so when we look at the hearing tests done after we started sodium thiosulfate and after the hearing loss, it seemed to not decline as much as it was. It seemed to sort of stay. She has mild to moderate high-frequency hearing loss, and it's kind of seemed to sort of stay at that level for the last 3 rounds that she was given.
Sure. And then my second question for you is, I know there's a lot of uncertainty right now, but I was curious if there's anything in particular that most worries you about her future.
It's the social impact and the academic impact. When I hear these teenagers and other people talking about how it impacted them in school, and bullying is a huge issue in the United States right now, and I worry how do I protect her from that? Is that going to be something that's going to be a battle that she has? Kids can't get away from bullying. Their social media they can't get away from it now. So I just worry about her future. Will she be okay having to wear hearing aids? Will she be able to overcome those things? Can I do anything to help her? And I don't think that there's any answers to that. I don't know. I feel like it's a definite that there will be issues that she'll face as a teenager and a child and into adulthood, that there's not always something I can do to help her or that she can do for herself, that she's just going to have to go through life with those challenges.
Sure. Thank you so much for sharing. So I want to put it out there in case there's anyone in the audience that has had experience with progressive hearing loss after chemotherapy has been completed. And if so, if you'd be willing to share anything about what that looked like, give us a sense of that experience. I know, we haven't really explored that much yet, so if there are any experiences, would love to hear about that.
Hello. Josh was diagnosed in 1999, and after one dose of cisplatin, he had moderate to severe hearing loss. And we started to notice that he was mumbling a little bit more, somewhere around 13 years old, 14 years old. We took him back to the audiologist. We did an annual evaluation every year, and I brought it up. And she said, yes, I've noticed that his hearing his hearing loss has continued to progress, which absolutely floored me because no one had ever shared that possibility with me. After 3 years, basically what you're told is that's when the hearing loss stabilizes. And you're fighting so many different types of chronic side effects that the idea that you finally have figured out how to manage the majority of them, and then suddenly the apple cart gets overturned and you're flabbergasted to discover that now you have a whole new tsunami of things. And the hearing loss is huge when you're already at moderate to severe hearing impaired. My son progressed quickly into profound, and every year he has continued to lose an additional 5% of his hearing. He's a musician, and the audiologist actually has said you may not be able to perform if you continue losing the hearing at the rate that you're losing because you may not have anything left. Your hearing system is so delicate that any vibrations are going to become of concern to your hearing. And that's absolutely heartbreaking to me. So we are not quite sure how far this is going, but we've selected quality of life over that delicate hearing because that music is too important. He's already lost so much that I wouldn't dare take away something that's that important to him.
And the incremental losses that you've seen so far, have you noticed similar trends and impacts on his daily life from those subsequent hearing losses from year to year?
He no longer wears his hearing aids. So I think whether they're ineffective, I mean, he's vocalized some of that. Josh Hoffmeister is my son. So he's vocalized some of that. So whether it's from the profound loss, whether it's in combination with not using the hearing aids, he's mumbling a lot more. He's a little bit more withdrawn on occasion when he doesn't have the energy to invest so much in staying connected with the world around him.
Thank you so much for sharing. Any other experiences with progressive hearing loss? You can always bring it up at a later time too. And also, I know I've had my back turned to our panel, but if they have anything to add at any point, wave me down. I'll make sure to call on you too. So another couple of categories of things we haven't really explored a lot as we're kind of moving towards the end of our allotted time for topic one is we heard in Christy Knight's presentation this morning that oxytoxicity can also result in a couple other symptoms other than the direct hearing loss. There can be tinnitus or the ringing in the ears, as well as balance issues. And so I was curious if, in addition to the hearing loss, anyone in the room has experienced, if you've experienced either of those symptoms, and if so, would you be willing to share? I see a few hands on this side of the room. So we'll work our way, let's say, from the back to the front, starting with Colleen.
Hi. So I noticed I was diagnosed really early on at 10 weeks old. But I didn't notice my balance didn't go off until about, I noticed probably my adolescent years. It started to drop. And it continues to deteriorate, so hence the mobility. And so they haven't really, people are just guessing to why, but some are pointing at treatment, but nobody has said chemotherapy really. Some have said like radiation and whatnot, but doctors are really careful when I brought it up. I said, well, could it be the chemo? And they're really, that's their treatment they give you, right? And so they're like just like when I went to my radiologist, and like they don't want to put down the drugs that they're giving you, right? Because that's all they got. So, but yeah, no, it continues to spiral downhill, as does my hearing. So it's just, I mean, we just gotta deal with what we got. But yeah.
Thank you. I know we had a couple other hands here. The row right in front of her.
Hi again. That is definitely a problem that Emma has. She complains constantly about tinnitus, and I worry because, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but tinnitus is usually a sign of progressive hearing loss. At least that's what I thought I had heard from someone. She also has some issues with balance. I mean, we make a joke of it in the house because I'm the same way. We both have hearing loss. Mine is not chemo-induced though, but we both have issues with balance. So my husband will just jokingly call us Grace or something. But it's been a problem, and she has to listen to things at louder volumes to hear them. And I worry about that too, because I know that, as you had talked earlier, vibrations and those sounds can actually hurt her hearing for the future as well. So it's been a problem.
Any other comments on this issue? Yeah. I'll take these 3 comments.
What I wanted to add, because it wasn't mentioned, was the auditory processing delay, which can also accompany the hearing loss. We also discovered this once he hit puberty and the progression had begun again. And the way that it was explained to me by our audiologist was, if you look at the hearing that he's capable of as a piece of cheese, he has a piece of Swiss cheese. And when you're talking profound loss, you're talking a really tiny piece of cheese to start with. So the fact that in addition to the hearing loss, which is what is talked about the most, you have these additional residual issues that combined together actually create even more hearing challenges. It just overwhelms you with the total impact of what's happened because of chemotherapy.
Sure. Thank you again. Come on, just pass the mic right on up.
Hello, it's me again, Elizabeth. So there was 2 things that I wanted to comment on, the ringing of the ears and the balance. I am a dancer and I do pageants, so it's hard for me to, I'm walking in heels today, but just earlier, it was hard for me to stand still without starting to fall over. Sometimes I have to lean back against the wall so that I don't completely topple over. Dancing has been especially hard for me since I picked back up after I came back from chemotherapy, because it was hard for me to do turns, alsacons. You may not know what those are, but they're dance terms. Just different types of dance things, and it's been really depressing, I guess you could say, because I'm not the person who I used to be. And then the ringing of the ears, it's going on right now, and it's hard for me to be alone by myself because I don't like just being alone or not talking to somebody, because then all that I'm focusing on is the ringing in my ears. I can't focus on anything else. I have to, I want to concentrate without everybody else distracting me, but I also don't want the ringing of the ears to drive me crazy, which it does. I cannot stand it. And ever since I've started hearing it, I've asked my mom and my dad over and over again what we could do to help stop it. And unless you do some type more medicines, which I don't like either, there's nothing really to do except take it and move on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Anything to add?
I don't know if this is necessarily the appropriate place to put this, but I think one of the things that I'm hearing as I'm listening to parents and to one one of the things I'm hearing when I'm listening to the parents and to everybody else is when you're isolated from your peers, and whether it's music or it's dance or whatever, and that's what's getting you through, whether it's treatment, post-treatment, or in Elizabeth's case, she's just living with cancer because she's not even, we chose to discontinue treatment, but we need to have treatment that's better focused on each individual child, in my opinion. A couple people have mentioned this where a lot of doctors have told us that we just have to take it. That's what it is. When Elizabeth was diagnosed, she was diagnosed with 95% of her body involved with neuroblastoma. Within 24 hours, they started aggressive treatment because we didn't have any options. We weren't even given an option to get a second opinion. We wouldn't even tell her for months that she had stage 4 because we were afraid that she would give up. So, she asked for a long time to go back to dance, and then there was a lot that went into that. But the balance, it's very frustrating, and it's really hard because she went from being the top of dance class to put back with, the second and the third graders because of balance. She's been penalized because of balance. We need better treatment. We need treatments. We need to look at that. And it's not just one subset. It's not just the doctors. It's not just the clinicians. Everybody together needs to look at what is best. For us, quality versus quantity. For her, treatment didn't come in an IV bag or a pill. It came for getting her back into dance, but at the same time, it causes a lot of frustration.
Sure. And sharing that is very appropriate, and thank you. Very helpful, sets a lot of the context for things we're going to actually build on and talk about in our next topic on preferences about treatments. So, thank you for connecting the dots for us there and sharing that. We have time for just one or two more comments before we move to our break, and then we'll come back and tackle topic 2 together. Does anyone else have any other experiences they would like to share on the burdens and impacts of hearing loss? We have a hand up here in the front.
Hi, my name is Charlene Mersberg, and we're from Kailua Kona, Hawaii. This is my daughter, Ruth. She's a 12-year survivor. She's going to be 17 years old. She was diagnosed at 4.5 with stage 4 neuroblastoma. Our treatment hospital was Kapiolani Women's and Children's Hospital. Right from the get-go, it was very difficult to get a diagnosis. It took a while, and then once we got the diagnosis, we didn't have much of a choice. We understand the treatment was fairly similar with the exception of one major hospital in New York. This all happened within a matter of hours, and we had to start treatment. We weren't given many options, although we were very well and heavily consented of all the things we would lose. Hearing loss was one of them, along with a laundry list of other lifelong side effects that she lives with every single day. She has severe high-pitched hearing loss. What I think some of these kids live with when they're young, they just don't know any better of what they're missing. I find this pretty unacceptable. And I hope we can make some real change here. What we've done to modify her schooling is because of our son who is high-functioning autistic, and we went through the whole IEP and process and everything and did extreme advocating, I was tired and we were exhausted. We just sat down with the powers that be because they would not understand, no matter what experts I brought in, of what we were dealing with. And it's worked fairly well, but we've had to adjust her educational systems. She's now in a blended charter school education, which has been the best thing that could ever happen for her because we can control how she hears things, her environment a whole lot better without having to constantly fight the school system. She does do fairly well, but she puts out a lot of effort to get the grades and keep her status and National Honor Society, and everything. A tremendous amount of effort. We came here because we want to try and advocate to get her hearing loss back. We're thankful for our panel. We're thankful for all the stakeholders that are here. I'm thankful for my fellow moms and dads that are here that know my story and live it every single day. And thank you to the FDA who has come here to listen to our stories.
And thank you for coming here all the way from Hawaii. So I'm looking, it looks like, we'll take one, this will be our final comment of topic 1.
My name is Kim, and I started treatment for rhabdomyosarcoma when I was 6 years old. I'm now 32 years old, and I have severe, I've been living with it for so long, but I think it's severe hearing loss from chemotherapy. I also, actually in my right ear, am deaf, but that's also from radiation and surgery. And my speech impediment is also from radiation and surgery. But when I was in elementary and middle school, I don't think it had a huge impact on me socially, but then as I got older, I think in high school and then more in college, I had more social anxiety and felt more socially isolated, and it's kind of just gotten worse as I got older. So now, like going to any events or, social gatherings with people, either with groups of people or where there might be background noise or anything else that might make it harder for me to hear, makes me anxious. And then a lot of times I'll, plan on going to an event, but then when it comes time to leave, I can't get myself to leave. So, I'll just skip it. I also have depression, which, I don't think is completely related to my hearing loss, but the hearing loss and everything that comes with that it definitely contributes to that. And I also don't think that people don't understand how complex it is to have a hearing loss, how many different things it impacts and how many daily activities it impacts and how draining it is when you have to work so hard to understand what people are saying and what's going on around you. And trying to understand what people are saying. And it also, people think that you're going to hear something or not when someone says it, but when your brain is trying to fill in the holes of the sounds you can't hear, there's also a delay. So someone might say something and I don't understand it right away, and then there's a little delay before my brain figures it out, and then I respond. But, there's just all these activities that, one thing might not be a big deal, but when, if I'm driving with someone in a car, I can't look at them and I can't hear them, and that gives me anxiety. And then, knocking on a closed door gives me anxiety because, you either have to wait for them to come and open it, or you have to chance, you think they said come in, so you open the door and you don't know what you're going to find. So, all those daily moments, I guess, add up and make things difficult. Also, I wanted to say that to Carolyn that I did not know crickets made noise. So that, my mind is blown that crickets make sound, because I didn't know that. So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for sharing those. Some very insightful examples that you shared. So at this point, we're going to go into our break. When we come back, we are going to, like I've said before, tackle topic 2. We're just going to build on this, and we're going to move into talking about your approaches to treatment. So I want to thank you all for your participation, and we will get started back at 3:25.